the theme of this conference, or one of them, is connected cities, and I know you're both involved with the Sydney Metro project. Why don't you tell me about that project and how it speaks to this idea of connected nodes of urban development?
Well, I think what's happening with the Sydney Metro is we're currently looking at 6 stations, and it's, you know, what's interesting is the fact that they're not just metro projects, they're projects which are linking to oversight developments. So what will follow the metro will be the oversight developments above the metro, and those are obviously then you know, completely interlinked with the transportation system below, thereby connecting critical pieces of the urban infrastructure together.
I think both Gerard and myself have been involved in a number of infrastructure rail projects, and probably the most, one of the most significant was Canary Wharf Tube Station in London. And what we can see from that, you know, it was finished in 2000. It's an underground station, but the impact of that station on the surroundings with Canary Wharf development has been, you know, completely profound. Huge towers have cropped up around it, and so, you know, as a practice, we're very interested in being involved in these types of projects, because, you know, since then, people now consider them together, that the infrastructure and these developments should be linked, and that's something we're working on a number of projects around the world, and something we'd like to, you know, get involved with here. So it's very exciting.
Is private development, and or architects for that matter, typically engaged early on by transit agencies and planners?
Yeah, I think. Well, I think we're a practice that has done a huge amount of infrastructure work.
Right.
And you know, it's about infrastructure. It's about actually setting the route, setting the, you know, it's setting the blueprint for what goes on around it. And you know, our master planning work has grown significantly in the last few years, and we're seeing more and more projects of that nature, particularly with public and private partnerships, where there's, you know, there's public money linking up with private development companies to come together in exactly the same way as Sydney Metro is working.
It seems like that's something that's going to be happening more and more, like you said, as cities continue to grow and grow rapidly. You've got more transit, you've got more opportunity for that kind of development, but also maybe more risks, right? Because it's got to be done right. So what do you think the architect's role should be in those projects and making sure that the public gets a huge benefit out of it, not just the private developers?
Well, I think the interesting thing at the moment is the fact that transportation's changing. And with the changes in transportation, with the changes, the revolution that is about to happen in transportation with autonomous vehicles, the type of transport that we're all going to be experiencing is going to be different. It's going to be safer. It's going to interface with people in a different way, and that's definitely going to influence the urban fabric and the whole structure of cities. So. Where at the moment we're all used to individual transportation, driving ourselves, in the future shared transportation is going to become much bigger than it is currently. So yeah, it's no surprise really that cities are re-looking at the structure of their transport infrastructure.
Yeah, and Circular Quay Tower, which is our current project in Sydney, we're designing, we're about to submit for the DA. That, albeit is not over a rail station, it is intrinsically linked as a site to the transport network, so to Circular Quay, to the interchange at Circular Quay, not just the ferries, and obviously the development of George Street. So George Street has got the introduction of the light rail and trams that are being installed now. And that project is, you know, it's a very big building. It's going to be the tallest commercial tower in Sydney. And the way that it links into the urban fabric and the transport network, which at the end of the day is how people move through the city to these buildings and up them, is really significant, and it will be the success of the project because the city's done so much work in thinking about this and putting the right kind of rules and regulations in place to make it happen.
Right, so Circular Quay Tower, in this name for Circular Quay, which has been referred to as Sydney's front door, because it's where all the ferries come in, it's the historic harbor, there's also buses and trains. How does the design actually engage all of that actively?
It's really through the kind of network of laneways that link to it, and also the tower sits between two major roads, between George Street and Pitt Street, and those are at slightly different levels. So that's allowed us to introduce a split level arrangement of the ground plane. So the lobby, normally at a tower, the lobby hits the ground, and that can tend to not activate the ground plane, and on this project it's going to be completely different. The lobby is raised, the ground plane is surrounded by laneways retail, and so the tower brings a benefit to the city in that it's integrated.
And there's provision in the tower for cyclists, so cyclists coming to work, there's storage for 250 cycles at the base of the tower, there's an area where there can be repairs carried out to cycles, hired bikes. That's actually in the brief for the project. So, and that all sits next to and adjacent to the public square.
What was there a parking requirement? Even so?
There is some parking, not very many. I think it's, from memory, it's 90 spaces. So there's a small car parking component. But the real goal of the city, I think, in the creation of this project and defining the envelope was its link to the infrastructure and transport network in Sydney.
Right. So I guess that's a great example of an individual project addressing the notion of a connected city, the theme of this conference. If you take that more broadly, what do you think a connected city looks like in the future, and how do you prepare for it?
I think that you know, the really connected city will be the smart city, the one that's connected to not only to infrastructure but also to the tech, to the communication systems which are coming into the city, and how they all interrelate and relate to one another. How do we power our transport in the future? How does that come from the ground? How do vehicles interface with the power network? How does data travel as we travel in different ways? And part of our issue will be in the future whether people need to come into cities, whether people need to come to work. We can all work from home. We can all carry on our lives and carry on our work lives with a mobile device. So actually you then have to ask yourself the question, why do people want to go to work? What do we need to provide for people to want to go to work? Because you will have a choice. And, and that will be, you know, that will be a huge change.
Ross?
So we're working with a number of technology companies who are posing these questions because, you know, they're behind this kind of revolution in terms of the way that people might work in the future. But interestingly, for a couple of headquarters projects, what their driving force in the brief was, how do we actually attract people into these buildings because they can work remotely, as Gerard was just saying. The reality is, from a creativity point of view, people need to meet and be together, mix and share ideas, and that's how innovation occurs. So the challenge they've given us on other projects is, you know, create the workplace of the future that brings these people in, so they want to be at work, and that will then ultimately lead to creativity, innovation, and ultimately, you know, the next round of products and
that will also change how the working environment needs to be connected together. Because at the moment, as we arrange buildings in towers and we arrange them with vertical floor plates, you know, there may have to be much more visual connection through the buildings from one floor to another because of the way that people are interfacing with each other.
That gets to the whole notion of a vertical village or a vertical city.
Exactly.
I mean, if you've got the different tenants on different floors, how much integration can you feasibly have within one tower?
Well, I think the whole principles of towers are being questioned, and I think again we're in a moment of transition. What is saleable space now may not be saleable space in the future. You know, at the bottom of the Circular Quay Tower, we've got innovation space. We've got spaces with a higher floor-to-floor dimension than in other areas of the tower. Those are specific areas specifically to attract the incubation groups, which will be potentially the future tenants in the tower later. And I think these are things which architects are being challenged with today.
And we design for that flexibility. For example, in the Circular Quay Tower project, we'll be designing in what we call soft spots in the floor plates, so parts of the slabs that can be removed to provide interconnecting stairs or voids, so that tenants can actually change the building over a period of time and create the links between the different floor levels. But we go beyond that because as a practice, we're really interested in the very long-term future of buildings and how long they're going to last. And we like to look at how they might be changed of use. So maybe an office building changes to an apartment building in the future.
And you can actually make structural elements like that can be changed without compromising the building.
Yes,
design.
correct. And you just think about it when you're planning the building such that it could be altered in the future. And it's just how you plan it, really, and the relationship.
And again, Circular Quay Tower is column free.
Right.
The structure is on the outside of the building, and the building is free of columns inside, which gives you total flexibility, as Ross says, total flexibility between office, residential, or mixed use.
Because typically in a tower, the column grid inside the floor plate becomes the defining element for how you position walls.
Right.
So whatever column grid you do will ultimately be a constraint in the future. So if you can get rid of those, and it's a project we're lucky enough to, the proportions of the floor plate are such we've been able to do that. And working with some very creative engineers, we've achieved a column-free floor plate. And that'll. So
that was the goal going in, and then you had to engineer the solution for it, or did that come about through the design process because you knew that you had the structural capability of going column-free, and then you said, well, let's do that?
Well, the two are linked together. So this particular tower, Circular Quay Tower, is an unusual floor plate, and that came from the kind of stage 1 planning envelope. So what we thought was important was that to give, because the floor plate is of a size and shape that's not typical, we thought it was very, very important for the users of the building to have the flexibility and not be constrained by a column grid. And the sizes were such that we were able to achieve these spans. And the spans are quite big, but working with the engineers, it's been we've managed to get there. So the big picture is, in the long-term future of that building, it's very robust and it has great flexibility.
And I guess the longer you can keep a building around without it being eventually razy is better for sustainability. It's better for lots of things.
Absolutely. The longevity of the building is everything in terms of sustainability. If you're not demolishing the building in 50 years, if the building can transform itself into another working environment or living environment, you've got the future.
Gerard, you mentioned earlier autonomous vehicles maybe revolutionizing things. I want to ask you each if there's some trend, transportation or otherwise, that you think will revolutionize your job as architects, and how you anticipate those kind of giant changes that, by definition, are kind of impossible to anticipate.
I think the interesting thing, if you take the autonomous vehicle, is that the autonomous vehicle doesn't need to look or act like any vehicle we have today. So, for example, when you leave your home in the morning and a vehicle picks you up, what is that vehicle? Is that your workplace? Do you start working from the moment you step into the vehicle? You don't need to think any longer in the vehicle. Or is it an entertainment space? Or is it, can you hold a meeting in it? Can you have meetings that start from home? There's plenty of, already in California, some of the tech companies are taking their staff to work in buses,
right,
where they start working on the bus when they get on the bus.
Right.
Once you take away the driver, once you give the privacy of a single unit, the opportunities are enormous.
Ross, what do you think? Autonomous vehicles?
There's a big change, not just in terms of the way the vehicles sort of function and are driven and guide themselves. There's obviously an enormous change into the kind of whole concept of ownership of these types of vehicles.
Right.
Traditionally, everyone would think about buying that vehicle and having it.
Owning their own car.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that we're seeing it already with all the kind of car sharing things and the autonomous vehicle side of things. I think it's just going to move that even more. So I'm pretty sure they won't look as much like cars as Gerard was going through there. I think they're going to change radically.
How do you as architects respond? I mean, does it change how you have to design buildings?
Well, I think we have to respond to the urban environment changes completely. And I think that the relationship pedestrian and vehicle changes, because you can control a vehicle, you can't control a pedestrian. A human being will do what he wants to do. So when you mix the two together, you get inefficiency. Because when a vehicle knows to stop because of an interaction, that creates an inefficiency if the two collide. So how do you deal with that? So do we separate vehicles and people? How do we make people and vehicles work together in a very efficient way? Obviously, you'll be your time for moving around the city will also change because your vehicle will take the shortest route. So time between meetings, people will become more efficient. All of these things are going to change cities.
And you're looking forward to that change, or you'll see what happens, I guess?
Absolutely. I think that you know, we're at the crossroads of a new industrial revolution.
I'm very much looking forward to that change in the future. I think it's what makes our jobs exciting and something we love to react to and be kind of involved with. So yeah, I think it's going to be, you know, the future's bright.